for decades. The question is whether that energy is there. They've seen the same things we see in places like Florida, where there has been a higher than expected Latino turnout. It's not exclusive to Florida, of course. They recognize it's an uphill battle, and as we speak more privately with some of them, folks who are with the campaign now and were with the campaign formerly, you get the sense from them that they realize this may not be tilting the direction they needed to. Nonetheless, when you speak to them publicly, on the record, they all suggest we feel good, we've done everything we can, and we feel confident that we'll leave tonight a winner.
All right, Peter Alexander outside Trump Tower, where that Trump campaign all began back in June of 2015. Peter, thank you for that. Now over across town, staying in New York City, though. This is inside the Javits Center on the west side of Manhattan. There is Kristen Welker. She's with the Clinton campaign. This is where they're setting up shop tonight. So, Kristen, these last 10 days, last 2 weeks of the campaign for the Clintons, this has been a roller coaster for them. You had James Comey 2 Fridays ago coming out with that letter saying he's discovered more emails raising all sorts of possibilities. Clinton campaign certainly was put on defense by that. Now, more recently, the second letter from Comey saying, okay, we went through the emails, nothing new there. What note is this campaign ending on? How do they feel coming into tonight?
You framed it perfectly, Steve. It has been a roller coaster. I spoke with a top Clinton campaign official just moments ago who told me we feel good, we finished strong. That's the bottom line. This official telling me that Secretary Clinton closed out this campaign in the exact way that she wanted to, on a positive note, talking about her vision for the country, how she plans to unify this deeply divided electorate if she is in fact elected. As you point out, Steve, this campaign was really pushed into the negative territory after that first announcement came out by Director Comey. We saw Secretary Clinton go back on the attack vigorously against Donald Trump, really in defense mode. But in these final 48 hours, that has all shifted. And you had that rally last night in Philadelphia, Steve, in which it was really a show of force by top Democrats. President Obama, the First Lady, former President Bill Clinton, all coming together. It was unprecedented, of course, in Philadelphia, the very city where Secretary Clinton officially accepted her party's nomination. How is Secretary Clinton spending this day? Well, I am told she's spending it with family and also working on 2 speeches, one for either scenario. I asked this campaign official what we can expect from an acceptance speech, and I was told, look, listen to what she has been saying. The speech this person pointed to will likely talk about unity, likely talk about her vision for the country, all of the themes that we've heard her lay out over these past 19 months. And then I said, well, what is she planning for a concession speech? If that, in fact, happens, this source telling me they're not even thinking about that right now. They want to focus on the positive. So, Steve, they are preparing for what they hope will be a victory party tonight at the Javits Center, which, of course, we continue to say this has a glass ceiling. The symbolism, I think, lost on no one tonight. Steve.
All right, Kristen Welker at the Javits Center. Again, that's where the Clinton campaign is going to be tonight. Kristen, thank you for that. Meanwhile, more on that lawsuit Peter Alexander just told you about, filed today by Donald Trump's campaign. This is out in Nevada, Clark County, Nevada. That's where Las Vegas is. As we mentioned, that lawsuit has now been thrown out by a judge out there. NBC News correspondent Pete Williams, Justice correspondent Pete Williams, joins us from the newsroom. So, Pete, tell us more. This stems from that early voting period in Nevada. It ended on Friday. There were still voters in line. They were allowed to vote. Trump campaign was saying shouldn't have been.
Right. 2 claims they make, basically. These are 4 largely Democratic precincts in Las Vegas. They say, as you do, that voters who showed up after the polls closed, that were not in line when the polls closed, were still allowed to vote. But the bigger question, they say, is that some of these precincts changed the closing time after the closing times were already announced, and the Trump lawyers say you can't do that. Now, what they asked the judge to do in this lawsuit they filed today is they said, we want you to set the voting machines and the ballots aside. And the judge said, well, we were going to do that anyway. That's what we do at every precinct. What is it you really want? And during the hearing, they said, well, we need to preserve a record here. We need to know who all the poll workers were. And that's what they really want. So I think, Steve, this is all about doing the spade work here that would be necessary if the Trump lawyers decide later to file a contest and contest the results of these elections. And presumably then the relief would be only the votes would count that came in before the closing time, if that's what a court were later to rule, in which case we're probably talking here about just a couple of hundred votes would be my guess.
All right, Pete Williams, NBC News Justice correspondent. Pete, thank you for that. Now, a quick check-in over here with the big board. Going to be giving this thing quite a workout tonight. Final check before the polls close here on the road to 270. What to watch for tonight as these results come in. So, look, the bottom line, Hillary Clinton comes into tonight ahead in this race. It would be an upset if Donald Trump were to pull this thing out. If Donald Trump is going to pull that upset off, what does he need? A couple of pretty much must-wins on this map. You can see Florida's the biggest. If Hillary Clinton were to win Florida, look what that does to her electoral vote count. Donald Trump then wouldn't just need to win everything that's gray here. These are sort of the closest things we see to toss-up states, to battleground states. Trump in this scenario, if he were to lose Florida, he's got to win them all, but then he'd have to win a couple of these big blue states, not just Michigan. He'd have to get a Michigan. You can see if he flipped that red, she'd still be over 270. He'd have to pull another rabbit out of the hat, like a Pennsylvania maybe. That becomes pretty much too tough of a task to even imagine. So Donald Trump, for all intents and purposes, Florida is an absolute must-win state for him. And again, he's pretty much then got to run the table in these gray states. Every one of these states that he loses, it means he's going to have to make up for it with electoral votes in a state that's blue up here. A couple other trouble spots for Donald Trump. You know, we've seen early voting indications out of Nevada. That's where that lawsuit we were just talking about stems from. The Trump campaign, that lawsuit tells you they are concerned what they've seen out of Nevada. And again, if they lose Nevada, that means they've got to flip one of these blue states. So we've seen them paying so much attention to Michigan, Florida, Michigan. Those loom pretty much as the biggest must-win states for them, among others, early on. But Florida, Michigan, those are becoming pretty essential to the Trump path. We will have much more, obviously, with this board tonight. We can get into the counties. We can get into individual cities and towns. And here's a lot we're going to be doing with it as those votes come in. So make sure you stay tuned. We'll have a lot of fun with that tonight. Meanwhile, joining me now, MSNBC contributors Michael Steele, former chair of the Republican National Committee, and E.J. Dionne, a columnist with The Washington Post. So, E.J., I'll start with you. Clinton campaign, I got the sense a couple weeks ago they looked at this race and they weren't just thinking win. This was after that Access Hollywood tape. They weren't just thinking win. They were thinking margin. They were thinking mandate. They were thinking making some kind of statement that might help her govern. Where do you think they are tonight?
Well, you know, I think they could get there eventually if all those states fall their way. They would get something like 322 electoral votes, which is pretty good. But what they lost is the opportunity to make a very strong, positive closing argument once that Comey letter came in, and they had to return to reminding people who Donald Trump was. You know, we might, for example, be looking at a map where Arizona could go to them. Now, they're still doing pretty well in Arizona, and that's at least a long shot for them, but it might be less than a long shot. But, you know, a win will be a win. But if she can get over 300 electoral votes tonight, which is very possible, then I think she could begin to make a case like that.
Michael Steele, it feels to me that in the last couple of days of this campaign, I don't know how you want to describe it, the overall mood, the overall feel of the campaign changed. That Trump really did have Clinton on defense. Was it the letter? Was it the second Comey letter?
I think the Comey letter 10 days ago really did have a chilling effect. And the ripple from that was not so much how it played out at the presidential level, but down ballot at the Senate level. I think it reinforced opportunities in places like New York and New Hampshire that pulled those races a little bit tighter, a little bit closer for the Republicans to hold on to. So when you look at this as a net overall, the Republicans got a bump from that. They did. The campaign, the Trump campaign, probably, yes, got the Clinton folks a little bit nervous and a little bit on defense, winding up going to Michigan and going to places like that. But the real effect that I've seen has been down ballot.
This Trump coalition that's emerged, and you heard Peter Alexander talking about there in terms of they're looking at, everybody has the anecdotes during Election Day. Hey, our people are coming out. Well, you never know. But they are talking about, you can see what they're thinking is white working class, rural white voters. This is sort of the core of the Trump coalition. That is different than what past Republican candidacies have been built on. Is this the future? Whether it's Donald Trump or not, but are the voters he's tapped into the future of the party?
No, not at all. I mean, they are a part of the future, but they are not the future. The future of the party is is every single person who calls themselves an American and they're eligible to vote in the United States of America, period. That's where the party needs to be. That's how we had success in 2010. We did a national effort that branded the entire country, every voter, as a Republican voter. And then you go out and you make that case. That's what the party's going to have to do. You cannot sit back in the cut and think that, oh, well, we can rely on this group of white folks to show up. Those days are done. It's not going to play out that way anymore. You've got African Americans, gays, lesbians, Hispanics. You've got an entire range of people now who are enfranchised. They feel invigorated by this process. That's a great irony from this whole thing. As ugly and as distracting as it was, it triggered something in people. So now for the Republican Party especially, that's going to go through its catharsis and its wringing of its hands. Get over that quickly. Develop the message. Focus for the future on where you want to take the country and recognize that every American now is in play.
And EJ, if there's one state on this map, I think you might agree with me on this, that I'm most interested in, well, besides Massachusetts, I'm always interested in Massachusetts. If there's a second state, though, it's Michigan. And Michigan is this state. You go back to 1988, it's been a Democratic state, but we're looking at the possibility here. The reason it seems both campaigns are so interested late in this campaign is they each see, the Trump campaign sees some unusual strengths for a Republican in there, and even the Clinton campaign sees some unusual potential strengths for a Democratic candidate. There's sort of a shakeup in Michigan that may tell us something bigger.
I agree with that. I mean, I think Michael Steele is obviously right that the Republicans, this white working class strategy has its limits. And if Florida goes to Clinton tonight, that will be the nail in the coffin. It will really be the night of the Latinos. But in Michigan, you could have two things going on. One, Obama carried that state by just over 449,000. 382,000 of that margin came out of Wayne County, which is Detroit. Now, we don't know how. There's been population movement there. Detroit's population has probably gone down some. She can't afford to lose that much of Wayne County, that many votes out of Wayne County. They wouldn't go to Trump. They just wouldn't be there. Then the question becomes, does she pick up a little more in the suburbs, or is there this white working class wave that Trump is talking about? If it's going to materialize anywhere, I think it's going to materialize in Michigan. If it's going to flip any state. You may see a little of it in Pennsylvania, but I think Michigan, Florida, and North Carolina are going to be the three most interesting. North Carolina, because you could have the Democratic ticket, including the presidential race, pulled in by the governor's race. The Governor McCrory is so unpopular among key Democratic voting groups that he could pull in enough Democratic votes to tip the state.
Yeah, in Michigan, Macomb and Wayne County, when we get that board fired up later, right next to each other. What a fascinating story putting those two next to each other.
Can't wait for you to pull it out of the map.
There we go. And then the board will probably catch on fire or something. We'll see. EJ Dionne, Michael Steele, thank you both for joining us. Now to the actual voting. Tens of millions of Americans heading to the polls today to cast their ballots. Millions more, of course, took advantage of early voting in 37 states. One state we are watching closely, no surprise here. We always watch this one closely. The Sunshine State, Florida, going to obviously play a key role tonight. Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Miami. And Gabe, a lot of people look at Miami-Dade County, and they say that is the place to watch early tonight. That county, that area of Florida.
Let's get people
that's exactly right,
so
Steve. Good afternoon. As you mentioned, early and absentee voting is just simply huge in Florida. 6.5 million votes counted, and that's about half of the eligible voters in Florida. You can see here the polls close in about 3 hours. We've seen the lines moving very quickly here throughout the day. We're expecting some of the after-work crowd to get in here right before the polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern time. In the Panhandle, they close at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Now, no major problems here in this part of Florida, in Miami-Dade or Broward counties, save for one instance up in Pompano. There was a situation there where two clerks were fired, as well as two poll watchers dismissed from one polling location because of a dispute. That the supervisor of elections just told us that it was a dispute, but that's really about it. No major issues here in Florida. Right now, we are waiting for the polls to close here. Again, the Latino vote in Florida, the thing to watch, the Clinton campaign thinking it could be the game changer in this critical battleground state. Steve?
Yeah, right. And so interesting to watch Election Day in a state where so many of the votes have already been cast. Gabe Gutierrez down there in Miami. Gabe, thank you for that. Wall Street, meanwhile, also keeping a close eye on the outcome of this election. For more on that, we're going to turn to MSNBC's Ali Velshi. He's at the New York Stock Exchange. So let's do a little tea leaf reading, Ali. What can you tell us about this election based on what's happening on the trading floor?
Oh, it's one big fat tea leaf. One doesn't have to really read this too much. The Dow closed 72 points higher after almost 400-point gain yesterday. They are betting on a Hillary Clinton win. Now, this, Steve, is very distinct from wanting Hillary Clinton to be president. It is that the market believes Hillary Clinton is going to win, and the market likes consistency. I've been talking to people on and off to say, what happens if Trump wins tonight? And I've had people tell me major sell-off, maybe a 5% sell-off. And I'll tell you why. A lot of the things Donald Trump says, reducing taxes, allowing money to come back into the country untaxed, are things that business people like, but they're not quite sure he can carry it out. They seem to be more aspirational than they are fact-based. Hillary Clinton does say she's going to raise taxes on the wealthy. That's something a lot of investors don't like, but the bottom line is they know what her plan sort of looks like, and at the moment they believe she's going to be president. If that changes tonight, I'm going to have to be back here tomorrow, Steve, reporting on a very tough market. If she wins, we're probably okay, and if she wins and the Democrats take the Senate, we may see a little bit of a sell-off. Businesses don't tend to like it when one party controls the White House and Congress, or at least parts of Congress. So what the ideal setup for investors is tomorrow is a Hillary Clinton win and the Republicans maintaining control of the Senate. But again, this is investors, and they can change their mind whenever they feel like it, Steve.
Interesting. Wall Street likes divided government. Ali Velshi at the New York Stock Exchange. Ali, thank you for that. Of course, keeping an eye right here on polling locations all over the country. Coming up, we're going to go live on the ground to Ohio, to Pennsylvania, to North Carolina, critical states, all of them tonight. And we're also going to go live to Wisconsin, where House Speaker Paul Ryan obviously has a lot invested in tonight's election at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. Do not miss MSNBC's special live election night coverage, full team coverage. That's going to kick off officially 6 o'clock. And in less than an hour before that, we are going to get our first look at exit polling 38 minutes from now. Stay tuned.